Hey, what is going on guys? Valky here, and as promised, I am bringing you guys the RGB Selector Guide for Epic 7 6th Anniversary Foundation Day. So do keep in mind this is going to be specifically for the selectors. Mostly, if you're a new player, this is who the information is super good for. Let me explain how this is going to work. Just so you know that if you want to see a tier list specifically for PvP in the end game, here is a video, which I'll link down in the description, for you guys so you guys can see the overall power level of each unit. But today we're going to focus on what units are worth taking with a selector. Number one rule, and the most important rule about any tier list for me personally, and I'll just say this once so I don't bother you guys. If you guys like a character and you put your mind to it, screw what I have to say, turn off the video. I don't even mind. I don't need the views because this is a video game and video games are meant to be fun. So if you have a character that you really want to take, forget what I said and just go take them. But if you like to optimize your gaming experience, I have 6 years worth of experience to share for you guys in the rest of this video. Over on the bottom are the Collab and limited heroes. A lot of them are very strong, yes, but no need to worry about them for now. They are not going to matter for us for a long time. You're also not going to have to worry about these guys since it's possible to get them for free. Just know that they're guaranteed, whether it takes you more time or putting in a little bit of the sky stones that we earn, but they're going to be essential to the difficult PvE content that will get you a lot of gear. Lastly, these three unfortunately are considered too new since they did release in the past half a year or so they won't be available for the selector. Hopefully Smilegate changes that because Janua should be up in 2 weeks and he is a great unit for anybody to pick up as he's really fun and does a ton of damage. Unfortunately Wukong as well, so if you don't pick up a Wukong or get lucky and somehow snag a Wukong, might just have to pass on Rift for this season. Now, looking at the top layer of units, the top tier, the units that are so good in multiple areas of the game, like including multiple areas of PvE or PvP, and they're just the cream of the crop in terms of what you can be used. On top of that, they're also damage dealers, which can be very hefty when it comes to skill ups, requiring Molagoras, and each one of these 5-star units will require 33 of them to fully max, which is a time-gated resource, so I would always make sure the fully decked selectors go towards DPS and bruiser units. Whereas, you know, like a support unit like Destina the healer or Noctwol a debuffer, despite how much their usage rate goes, which is very high, they wouldn't require a fully decked selector because you don't have to push that last 10% damage on their skill or even that extra bit of healing. It just doesn't matter most of the time. Now, for the returning players who have most of the units on this list, what I would actually recommend you do is pick this up for any unit you're thinking about imprinting into their ML versions. For example, if you got Empyrean Ilanov just now, which is a super strong unit, she's strong as hell, and you want to make sure she's a core character on your account, you're kind of feeling guilty about killing your A or S imprinted Ilanov, well, now you can do it guilt-free because you can get a fully decked Fire Ilanov back with your selector, and now you can just select one fully decked out without any guilt, knowing you don't have to waste any Molagoras. Now, the first unit on this list, Fire Ravi, got a lot of limelight during the World Championships as the current world champion. Hosmaray played her as one of his main units on the biggest stage of the game. While he did overly rely on her in my opinion, she has one of the highest power caps as a RGB PvP unit, thanks to her having great matchups into top tier units like Navy Captain Landy and Urban Shadow Shu, as well as the fact that she's just a healing, hit trading bruiser, which means she'll be easily able to just walk you through the story and hold it down for you versus the tougher bosses. Politis is the Swiss Army knife of PvP in Epic 7. Admittedly, she's not used very much in PvE, but she is played in every single form of PvP on both offense and defense teams and in real-time arena on multiple builds, including different damage builds and debuff builds. Now, if you played any other competitive games at all and you hear a unit can be used in this many ways, that is a clear sign a unit is OP and why I would say Politis is worth a fully decked selector. After her last buff, Green Celine got a lot of attention as one of the most coveted assassins in PvP. Her entire role as an assassin is to pick off somebody on the opposing team, and now further boosted by the fact that there are so many units, specifically fast opener units, that use non-attacking skills. With her buff, she now has a permanent uptime on her stealth buff, so she can easily be played in many situations and be very safe in letting you stomp arena and guild wars, while in real-time arena you get to trap your opponent's opener units. Now I would try to hit Ravi, Destina, or Iseria personally from the selective summons you get by finishing chapter 1 at the beginning of the game. That would be the best case scenario. But if you don't get any of them and you're not willing to reroll, I would say all of them are worth at least an RGB selector, with the damage characters maybe worth fully decked selector. After the top tier is where you have to make a choice. The characters in the second tier are great early game in PvE, but you will probably not use them anywhere else for a long time after you clear the story until the end of the game. But they will be massively helpful at the very least in the early game. If you're coming to the game fresh and you just want to have a chill time, I highly recommend picking up 1 or 2 units here. If you saw E7 and you thought, man, I want to play this game for the long haul, I want to be competitive, I want to fight for ranks, and I really want to go in to PvP and tear it up, then skip to this timestamp that my editor will kindly put up on screen for you guys. The first up is Green Iseria. This is a must-have PvE unit outside of what we get for free, since she's the only unit in the game after 6 years that can fully reset another character's cooldown, maybe giving a character 2 ultimates back to back. And it means she will be the only unit which has perfect synergy with Tamarin, the queen of PvE, and it will massively speed up the rate at which you can do story, you can do abyss, side story, nightmare raid. Almost all PvE content, you name it, will need a Tamarin. She can do it. She's just that good, but doesn't do too much in PvP. On top of resetting cooldowns, you can also put Song of Star on the Iseria. With her built-in defense break and the target buff, you will absolutely crush a lot of the PvE bosses that's usually very hard. Bellona is another goddess of PvE. She's the first gacha game character that I played that uses a fan with wind magic as her weapon, but her biggest asset is that she can inflict AoE defense break multiple times very quickly. And you guys will notice a pattern here, and that is defense break being one of the most valuable part of any unit in E7, as it reduces defense by a whopping 70%. It massively multiplies your damage, is the biggest damage multiplier in the entire game outside of, you know, fully penetrating defense. If a unit has multiple ways to apply defense break like Bellona, they'll be highly valued in PvE, although in PvP you might need some buff strips, but specifically for PvE units, Bellona just does everything. When you put a bloodstone on her, she'll be a damage dealer, she defense breaks, and she's a healing machine for any PvE content you bring her to. Luluka is, oh boy, you guys aren't gonna believe it, a good PvE unit with 2 ways of applying defense break while also providing good survival utility. She's just a blue version of Bellona, if you guys really want to think about it. Both are really strong for early and mid game, but once you hit that end game PvP phase, you'll probably not use either one of them for a long time. Green Vildred is in this tier thanks to his ability to attack only in AoEs, and when he gets a kill, he'll attack once again for free on the same turn, which really speeds up the rate in which he could clear story. But after you clear story, you're really not touching him until super late into PvP, when you start doing aggressive comps and realize, oh, he can imprint speed, which is a whole nother ball game, but that is super valuable and damn near unreplaceable. But he's probably the best selective summon unit, and I would take him here in a heartbeat if you find him in selective summon. But if you're very picky about your selectors, maybe hold him off. In a very similar vein, Sez is Vildred's little brother in the story clear category. He's even better at clearing story than Vildred because his AoE activates when you drop any unit below half HP. But you will never use him outside of early game, besides maybe like one very niche aggressive draft, like a Sez bomb draft. And you guys will figure it out, but he's probably the weakest pick in this tier, but he looks really cool while he speed runs you through story. Although I don't think that's super necessary, kind of your choice. Lastly, there's Haste, who, oh boy, let's just say he is the fire version of Bellona and Luluka. He's there for defense breaks off of 2 sources, and he has a little bit of defensive utility, and he'll replace those 2 when you need red units, specifically for things like Nightmare Raid or Avon Side Story or Rift. That's all he is for. After that is the generally good tier, and that means you're either good in every PvP mode or every PvE mode or some mix of those 2. But they're definitely used enough in between most game modes where I would say play, it will warrant you to use a selector on them. Pretty much anything this tier and above will get you really good value, especially if you're a PvP head where your aim is to, at the start of the game, I want to go for high ranks and I want to gun for PvP. Anything above this row is worth a selector. I repeat, Destina in particular is an absolute queen in all the content imaginable. She can cleanse your team's debuffs, heal their wounds, and even make up for player mistake by having an AoE revive. This is everything you could ask for in any support in any content, regardless of PvE or PvP. I wouldn't mind getting her out of my selective summons, but she is all defensive, so she won't speed up your story progression nearly as much as somebody like Ravi or Vildred. If all said and done and I don't have a Destina perfectly, you can bet on me using one of my selectors on her. Shu is a terror in PvP, but also quite nice in challenging content like Nightmare Raid and Abyss, where her specialty is punishing AoE attacks from the enemy. If you've seen her go off in PvP, there's a very similar unit, Navy Captain Landy. If you know what she does, Shu is just a very light version of her. Elena is a PvP defensive specialist, mostly used against a playstyle we call Cleave, where they play very fast and aggressive with a lot of damage, so you're forced to adapt your opponent's aggression. If you can't do that, you'll lose, but if you can do that successfully, it's usually a free win, as their composition will run out of steam and run out of tempo. The way I would describe it is dropping a Elena is the same vibe as dropping a Big Taunt versus Face Hunter in Hearthstone, or dropping Ghostly Prison versus Beatdown in Magic, or maybe you're picking Shen versus Tower Dive comps in League of Legends. Something to that tune. Elena, despite not doing any damage, is a very important character, and defending is very important in Epic 7. Arya is an ice element bruiser that is played specifically due to her excellent matchup versus popular units like Navy Captain Landy, Gala Lilius, and Genua, among others. She can hide her entire team and adapt a counterattack stance, which will let her tank and hit back really hard, but anyway, you guys don't care about that. Let's just be honest, you're picking her because she has big freaking bazungas and is the thickest character in the game. Alright, that's the number one reason you pick her. Noctwol is so strong as a debuffer, she's played in every PvP mode for both fast and slow strategies, and again, that is a clear indicator a character is OP when you can play them anywhere with any kind of build. If you're super new and not very into PvP, I wouldn't worry about her, but if you ever want to push for top anything in PvP, top 100, top 1000, top 1 in both Arena, Guild War, and RTA, this is a unit you can't live without. And you can bet that she'll be close to the core, if not in the core, for any, and I mean any strategy. Alencia is the best injury unit in the pool of RGB units. She just caught a buff recently as well, so it will be a lot of new players' best options outside of ML5s if you want to really flatten out the power curve between haves and have-nots for very high HP bulky gear, because injury chunks down your opponent's max HP pool, stopping them to hit back and allowing you to hit much harder and much more effectively. Abigail as well just got a buff that makes her even more solid as a utility damage unit. She's going to be a competent bruiser that can strip off an enemy's buffs, apply defense break, injure them, and then curse your opponent's damage dealer. She does a little bit of everything while keeping your back slot unit alive versus many high defense penetration assassins. She'll have a lot of utility, do decent damage while keeping one unit on your team alive. Know that she will not see a lot of usage until you are doing a lot of Guild Wars or RTA. Green Roana has one job: keeps your team alive through counterattacks, dual attacks, and extra attacks. This works both in PvE and PvP, but since early in the story there isn't a whole lot of those where bosses don't really start doing the crazy counterattacks, your opponents aren't going to be counterattacking 4 units, she's not going to get you any mileage until you're a few weeks into the game, but when she hits the board, you know you will never die versus units like Navy Captain Landy or Queen Azuma Sheik in Hell and Nightmare Raid. Lilius is a bruiser tank who has a couple of niche things about her that only she can do. One can be a tank or can be a bruiser by borrowing her teammate's attack stat. She can also cleanse debuff automatically when the opponent uses a non-attacking skill, which is something that's omnipresent on so many opening units, openers nowadays. And on top of that, her ultimate can fully cleanse her entire team, which is never a bad utility to have. Oh yeah, and her auto attack also pulls a dual attack from anybody else on her team. It's good, but let me tell you guys what, dual attacks is why you play Epic 7. It's one of the funniest things you can do in the entire game, and it enables a lot of pretty bonkers combo. Ran, Peyra, and Ida are like peace in a pod. They're almost like a package deal. You would pick one between Ran and Peyra because the most important aspect about them is that they're the two fastest units in the game, sorted by base speed. Base speed is a really good way to learn about base stats and how much those matter in Epic 7, since that is what you're going to scale off of when you start putting equipment on them, and having good base stats is just so important. I can't stress that enough. Good base speed unit will teach you about who gets to go first, who gets to go second, and that is something you're gonna learn over the course of playing this game. That being said, having either one of the fastest units in the game should let you leverage the base speed to overcome a lot of gear differences if you don't have as good gear as some of the returning players, some of the older players. Taking first turn lets you play any one of the aggressive strategies that they enable. Ida is a good combo unit that can go with them because she can follow up with either one of them once they take that first turn for you, and then she outputs a lot of damage. Ida is what we call a bridge unit, and she's the only bridge unit that's really worth taking off of the RGB selectors and bridge the gap between your openers and the rest of your team. If you want to know more about how that strategy works and how that team is constructed, you can watch this video in the description to catch up on a lot of the tips, tricks, and lingo we use in the game. The last unit I would say worth using a selector on is Aramintha, who is a great debuff and control unit as she puts out a lot of burns and stuns. And the reason that is important is because both early game in some of the earlier PvE content and super duper late game in RTA real-time arena, you will be using her to overload your opponent's team with debuffs to a point where their cleanse just can't keep up with you. Now, after that, we have all the PvE niche character, and all the characters here and below, I don't recommend you burning a selector on. Some of these units are either replaceable by lower rarity units, they're only good in one thing, or overall not very strong, or maybe they're too hard to gear. They're just units with problems. So I wouldn't recommend any of these units being picked up for the sake of an optimal gameplay, but if you already have every other unit on the list and you just want to use them to complete your Pokedex, I mean, I guess, why not? Ludica is used in a bunch of levels for Abyss and Nightmare Raid as a combat readiness controller. Combat readiness control in Epic 7 is pretty hard to explain, but just think about it as the reason why people build speed. The reason why people build a lot of speed is to get combat readiness, and combat readiness determines who gets to have turns, so it is arguably the most important stat in the game. Ray is the default cleanser for Nightmare Raid B's boss. Very hard to replace there. Fire Ken is one of the goats of Ancient Inheritance, and if you have him there, hey, he'll pull up for you and do work every time. Tenebria she's just cute, and she's one of the face characters of the game. I use her for expeditions, but that's really it. You pick her up because you like her. Now, PvP niche means they pretty much only have one strategy that they open up in RTA, but they might be important there, so I'll cover their usage really fast for you guys. Fumir is one of the premier cheese cleave units, as once her sleep and defense break goes off, you can set up any damage dealer to pop off against your opponent's team. But her limitation is you do have to play one red and one green unit with her. Not undoable, but definitely a very hard to play unit. So you guys get a picture of what kind of units belong in this tier. Sharoon in RTA is only played as a hand guy and a Laya counter because she can injure, she can cooldown delay, which is one of the few things that stop these guys. Elvira stops fighting spirit gain completely, which counters mainly units like Lone Crescent Bellona and Commander Pavel. Bihu is good at stripping buffs, blocking buffs, and killing your opponents through burn detonations. A useful unit sometimes, but you will not be building a whole account around him. Lua is like a more fair version of Nakwal, but her faster base speed gives her some matchup advantages where you might hesitate to pick Nakwal, so she's like an alternative version. Flan is the cookie cutter cleave setup, since she can CR push, give attack, and crit damage in a single skill, and if you count the rest of her kit, she lands defense breaks as well. If you want to know how aggression works in Epic 7, how cleave and aggro works, if you're a card game player and you want to understand all of Epic 7's aggressive strategy in a single unit, go read up Blue Flan's entire kit. She's everything you would want for an aggressive strategy, but her lackluster base speed does hold her back, and she is very telegraphing in letting your opponent counterplay against you. So Violet used to be the evasion 1v4 god, but now every new unit coming out either has enough raw power or mechanics to just blow right past him. He is, however, still unlosable if your opponent is drafting 3 or 4 blue units, hey, he'll still be able to solo the game for you. Kayron works in a very similar fashion. You build him real slow on the counterattack set, and as long as his immortality buff stays and he's slow, he can just get hit and counterattack back. Very strong versus fast teams, as long as he's staying alive. Both him and Violet are two guys that's used to play against the cleave playstyle, since their shtick is they don't need to take turns to be attacking back. So it takes advantage of their value when you're not taking turns. Lastly, these are heroes that really just aren't worth a selector. If you have literally everything else, sure, pick them up for the Pokedex, but I wouldn't really recommend it since it's not as rewarding in terms of gameplay as something like running 2 Politises, 1 for damage, 1 for debuff, to play both offense and defense. But yeah, alright, so that's the whole list. A guide on how to use your anniversary hero selectors. It's what I will be using to guide myself through the early game, because if you haven't heard, for this event specifically, for the 6th anniversary foundation day, myself and a few friends have decided to start new accounts and make a mad dash to see who can speedrun master rank RTA with a stretch goal of hitting champion. I know E7 is usually a super deep game, so I will be jumping in the shallow end with you guys and walking new players step by step on how an end game player with 0 spending, 0 friends, 0 resources, you know, besides all the crazy stuff we're getting for the anniversary, I'll play like that. We'll go through story, build up an account for ranked. I'll be streaming the entire adventure over on twitch.tv/Valky, and I'll be uploading that video here, hopefully day by day, if not every 3 days, to keep you guys updated on the progress and what you can do for yourself. I hope to see some of you guys out there, and I sure hope this information helps you out. That said, that's all I got for you guys in this video, and I will see you guys in the next video. See ya.